This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
What's happening? I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, I sit down with the Providence Journal's Brian Amaral. And this one, right out of the oven, so to speak, we recorded it earlier this week here at the Loft, right in the thick of Moldgate and the broader, situation that Speaker Mattiello's involved in. And if you're listening right now and wondering, wow, what is Moldgate? Well, we get into it during the episode, don't worry, but the quick summary is this goes back to late last year in December. Speaker Mattiello ordered an audit of the convention center through his capacity as chair of the JCLS, the Joint Committee for Legislative Services. Now, that's a 5-person panel that is essentially an operational institution for the day-to-day workings of the General Assembly, but also has the ability to audit quasi-public agencies and so forth. The allegation is that Mattiello ordered this audit as retribution for the convention center placing his friend on suspension for a human resources violation. The issue came to the surface because it's a structure of power conversation or issue. Minority Leader Blake Filippi basically took Mattiello to task for the process by which this audit was ordered, engaging in lawsuits and, media rhetoric and really just pushing back against what seems to be a process that is essentially the Speaker of the House single-handedly operating the JCLS when in fact it's supposed to be a 5-person panel that features 2 members of the minority party. So that's one element to this, a process question. And now some investigation or at least inquiries underway. Now, simultaneously with these investigations, apparently there was a mold problem, some kind of leak in the JCLS office that led to the floor being ripped up in the JCLS office and a bunch of furniture being tossed into a dumpster. Ted Nesi at WPRI observed this happening, caught wind of the fact that the office was being torn apart at the same time. There was some confusion, some questions. Were there documents from the JCLS documents being tossed? JCLS hard drive. So it turned into the whole scenario we now know as Moldgate. And really the reason it's relevant is the question is this a time in the arc of a speakership in which the Mattiello camp is starting to wonder, not legal implications, like I say in the episode. I'm not thinking handcuffs or anything like that, but just in terms of broad influence and the ability to operate as currently constituted. So there, kind of setting that up for you so you understand what we're talking about when Moldgate comes up in the episode and some of the big news surrounding that this week here in Southern New England. We, of course, also, as I want to do with media members, we discuss the media and Brian's outlet, the Providence Journal, what the future might look like, not only for the Journal, but for newspapers as a whole. And what's interesting is we were discussing one possible model that could actually work or seems to be working, and that would be the billionaire investors swooping in and buying up a newspaper, such as the case with the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, of course, with Jeff Bezos. And until just a few hours after Brian and I were here at the Loft taping this podcast, Warren Buffett, also one of those billionaire newspaper investors. Well, guess what? Brian sent over not more than like an hour, actually, probably after he left the Loft. Warren Buffett selling off his holdings in newspapers, including his hometown Omaha World Herald. So maybe not actually a method to pursue big picture, the billionaire investors swooping in and saving local newspapers. And it just shows how fast the conversation is constantly shifting and evolving around the future of traditional media, that literally within an hour, an idea that seemed reasonable now seems, questionable at best. So we get to all of that and much more in this episode, which, by the way, this episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast is sponsored by Newport Vineyards, located in Middletown, Rhode Island. Discover more at newportvineyards.com. Providence Journal 2020. What does that mean? What is that? Because I hear all the time filling in on WPRO, whatever, people are always like, oh, radio. Does anyone listen to radio, newspaper, people reading the newspapers, etc.? I think that's sort of, there's some truth to the decline and diversity in media consumption, but your experience, you're still getting a lot of feedback on your work.
Yeah. I think we've put out a daily newspaper for longer than anybody on this earth has been alive, and we will be continuing to do that until further notice. It's the rumors of our death are greatly exaggerated. We're still there every day, filled with people trying to do their best. Not as many people as there were before, obviously. Anyone can see that. But, I think we're professionals. We have a job to do, and we're still doing it. And we're still doing stories that I think have an impact. My colleague Katie Mulvaney had a great story this morning about court fees. I've only read the first, just on my way over here, a couple of paragraphs, but I know it's going to be really great, and it's going to sort of reorient the way people think about the court system. And we're still doing it. We're still at it, and I think the Journal still does have a commitment to those longer term investigative pieces, and and the desire is certainly still there. The resources aren't what they used to be, but I think in a lot of quarters, people's statements that the Journal is dying is wishful thinking. I think from some quarters, but we're still here, still causing trouble, and plan to continue to do so. I joined the Journal almost 2 years ago, and was obviously getting back into newspapers. I'd been in newspapers before. I was at a trade publication, and then in public radio for about 2 years, and then jumped back into newspapers in 2018. And that's, I think some people kind of looked at me funny when I said I was going to go ahead and do that. But
yeah, right.
But we're 2 years later, still here, still putting out a newspaper every day.
Well, I say as well, imagine just unplugging not just newspapers, but let's say like the traditional institutionalist media outlets from Rhode Island, and then look at what you're left with today and ask yourself,
nobody would uncover Moldgate. Those moldy carpets would still be causing a health hazard to all those people over at JCLS. Ted Nesi, great reporter, for him to be there and spot that. If he is not there to see that, how are we going to find out about it? He just happened to be there, and that's a very good example of literally his physical presence at the State House at like whatever it was, 9 or 10 at night. Ted needs to get a life, but it's great that he's there and is able to see that and tell us about it. And and there's so many examples I could think of at the Journal where we're at meetings where we're at the scene of a murder or shooting or just in court. Katie Mulvaney, like I said, being in court to see the name's going to escape me, but someone entering a no contest plea, and we were the only ones there for that. And to imagine a world where that's not happening is really scary. But I think it's. We're trying to find a way forward, and I know that all the people in the building at 75 Fountain Street are working really hard, to do it every day. So I think it's a question of how we're going to make the money to do it, but we're still doing what we always did, just fewer of us around to do it.
Yeah, I feel like when there's cooperation between any type of media outlets, obviously the competition is most important as well. But when you have, I guess, between digital / new media and sort of old guard media, when those relationships are cooperative, it seems like just the news gathering resources are then, yes, there's less reporters at the Providence Journal now or whatever, but then other people, whether it's Steve Alquist or whomever it may be, is part of that broad media conversation, are able to not fill in the gaps, but just broaden the story, broaden the conversation. When you have other outlets here, when they're just trying to undermine that whole thing, it's laugh out loud ridiculous. So a lot of the people who are most critical of, the media environment here are the ones who are the least cooperative, from my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the Rhode Island media in general is among the competitors who are out there all trying to do the same thing, which is good journalism. We're very competitive with each other, but we're also, we also at the same time like to see each other succeed and support each other when we succeed. There's always the gracious hat tip, first reported by WJAR, first reported by WPRI. So I think I think, yeah, there are the media looks a little bit different, well, a lot different than what it used to 40, 50 years ago. And you're right that there are these other sort of alternative avenues to get into it, like your podcast, for example. We were just talking off mic about how this wouldn't have been possible 30 or 40 years ago, and now it is. I mean, the gatekeepers are gone, and now there are ways for people to get into it other ways. Steve Elquist is another example of somebody who, who knows what he would have been doing before the internet. He could have been, he might have had a little newsletter that he printed in his garage.
A little anarchist newspaper style.
And it would have been great. I'm sure, that his Samizdat would have been fantastic, but would it have gotten to as many people as it does now? I don't think so. And I think that's ultimately a good thing. You do see some players in that ate that are not, that don't have that same sort of sense of responsibility. But I think overall, for the most part, the gate crashers are a healthy thing for the media environment. I think this is a perfect example of that. It's this is like a long form conversation that is really great. It's and in the commercial radio world, who knows if this is able to happen.
Right. And it's interesting too because when I've filled in on PRO and you've got like the 8-minute segments, a similar guest, like say a Seth Magaziner, who's Treasurer Magaziner, has been on here 3 times now. And I feel like we could book another hour conversation just based on getting into specifics of the pension investments and so on and so forth. We could go there. But when he's come on with me on the radio, I mean, if you compare the 2 interviews, they're both valuable because in the moment, all right, we've got 8 minutes. We're not going to dance around. Right. Who cares about what you did in college or whatever? Let's get why are we divesting from, assault weapons and, private prisons? You can get right to the question.
Yeah.
So you kind of need both of them as well.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I don't know what will happen in I suspect somebody in Rhode Island media right now is, if not multiple people, are thinking that they're either independently or within their news organization going to start making a more digital presence the way that like a Nisi has or a McGowan has with his list. And obviously the Journal has their email coming out every day at 5 o'clock, this just in. But I would imagine there'd be like 5 times as much as that pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at new ways of getting our stuff to people. And back in the day, more people had print subscriptions, but I would suggest, I think, and I don't know the statistics personally, but I would assume that just as many people are reading the Journal now as they did 50 years ago. The problem is not that nobody's reading it, because people are reading it. It's that how they're paying for it, the ads that are supporting it, the classified ads were just eviscerated by Craigslist. The big beautiful print ads that they used to pay a lot of money for are now little digital ads that they don't pay nearly as much. So it's not an eyeballs problem. It's a cash problem for us and for every newspaper around the country, except for the big boys that are sort of able to scale up to an extent that can make it a little bit less challenging. But it's not. We do have people reading us. We do have, again, like I said, I think we're. I don't know. I think we're just as relevant as ever. The challenge is finding a way to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you see a tweet from, Madeline List and don't necessarily even click on the story,
right?
Does that count as?
And even if you do click on the story, like the digital ad economy is something that's that's mind-boggling to me.
Right.
But
believe me,
it's nothing
like
it's nothing like even the little 3-inch ad looking for a babysitter. Remember? I don't know if you remember picking up the newspaper when you needed a summer job.
Oh, absolutely.
And you would look in the classified section. Now, where do you go? You go to whatever Monster.com or whatever, or what have you. Like, if you wanted, I remember, used to. I'm turning 32 in a couple of months, and even I remember, I'm not, I'm not some old timer, but I still remember sitting at dinner with my dad, thinking about going out to a movie. You'd pick up the newspaper and you'd look up the movie times.
100%.
Now, what do? You fire up the phone and you go right to the, So it's a strange world, but like I said, we're all working hard to find the way. And I think that I think we're going to continue on and in whatever new forms there are. That there is a resource issue for sure, and there are fewer people around, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but
Sure.
The people who are left are working as hard as they can.
Yeah, got Linda Borg, that's for sure.
Linda Borg is a legend. She's great. Yep. She's a great newsroom presence.
Yeah, exactly.
She's very. She's going to be there. Tom Mooney, Katie Mulvaney, Kathy Gregg, another,
of course,
and another person I really look up to as a model for people who've been doing it for a long time, and just trying to continue on in that tradition.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Support for the Bartholomew Town Podcast comes from Newport Vineyards, featuring Taproot Brewing Company.
Hi, my name is Kevin Beecham. I'm the head brewer here at Taproot Brewing Company in Middletown, Rhode Island. Started basically home brewing when I was 19 years old in my parents' kitchen, just messing around with different flavor profiles and ingredients. Pretty new to the state of Rhode Island and new to Newport especially, but really love it out here. It's a pretty awesome experience and really great to work with local producers and farmers, and in a small setting like Taproot Brewing where we can do, a lot of customized, unique recipes. So it's been a lot of fun.
Discover more at newportvineyards.com. Yeah, what's interesting about the numbers side of things? I've had this conversation with like Ian Donis, a few other people that, let's say I post, 60 seconds of an episode on Instagram.
Yeah.
In the Instagram stories.
Right.
And then X 100 or in some, let's say it's Sage Francis or something. So it gets into the thousands because people are going, oh, this is awesome. I like this guy. They don't know who I am. They know who that guy is. Now, does that mean that the podcast has gotten 3,000 more listens because Instagram stories, people listen to 60 seconds of it? Or did you have to hit play and listen to the entire thing on Apple Podcasts to qualify as a listener? What about a reader? If I happen to see the Projo while I'm at Walgreens, you know what I mean? I have my digital subscription, but let's say I pick up the paper and I read it, like while I'm standing there, am I now a reader? I think I am. I think all those people are engaged, so they qualify, and there's a big difference between paid subscribers and how many people, like you just said. But
the 60-second clip that you put on Instagram, who's making money from that? Instagram.
Bingo. Jeff Bezos is his buddy, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg. That's going right into his pocket for whatever it's worth.
Bingo.
And unless you sort of sneak in, some mattress company. This is sponsored by Lisa. You gotta be really subtle about But yeah, I mean and that's why I personally, Twitter and social media are really important ways of delivering stuff to people. But I'm always a little bit reluctant to break news without sort of a link back to our stuff.
Oh, definitely.
On Twitter. Why am I, that Jack guy, whatever his name is, he doesn't need another beach house.
Right.
I get a mortgage to pay. I don't care. Why am I gonna give that stuff away? And I know that might be a kind of an old-fashioned way of thinking about it, but I think if more people took that leap and just decided, okay, it doesn't matter if you're 7 minutes earlier on Twitter with your news, if you're going to break it with just like without some sort of link, I think there's like a little ego thing at play there, but you won't see me very often throwing stuff out on Twitter that's going to be like some big exclusive without some sort of link back to our story where at least we can get back to our own property. So I think that is it's a challenge.
Yeah, no question about it.
And look who's thriving. Facebook is thriving right now, which owns Instagram. Twitter is doing pretty well for itself too. I assume. The Googles of the world are doing really well, and off the backs of our work, not just at the Journal, but all these different places. And what's going to happen if we disappear? I don't think we're going to disappear, but you're sort of eating your seed corn in there if by doing that. So
To be determined, I guess. We'll find out as it rolls itself out.
We're still. I've said this before. I think it's 170 years. We just celebrated our anniversary. Might be 190. And I do honestly think that we're still going to be around another 170 years.
Yeah.
Or 190, whatever it was. I'm not good at math or remembering basic facts. But yeah, I mean, I think it's. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future, because of the work that people inside the building are doing. There are other challenges being foisted upon us by forces outside the building. But
yeah, I always wonder that too. I mean, I vaguely remember someone told me that Buff Chase or some group of people looked to buy the Journal or something like that at one point. I've always fantasized that I would love to buy, the Journal, WPRO, Channel 10, all the institutions, and somehow, or some other philanthropist, if someone buys Bartholomew Town for $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? And then just bring it back to the community, make it community run, totally, But then again, the corporate element, as negative as it is on one hand, it also does assist in keeping, the blood pumping at a certain level where it doesn't necessarily. There's a guarantee of some level of vitality, I guess, even if it means they're going to gut the place.
I haven't, I think there was sort of, back a couple of years ago, back when I was in journalism school, there was a lot of thought that like the nonprofit model could work. I haven't seen, ProPublica is great. I think the Texas Tribune is also nonprofit. I could be wrong about that.
Isn't like the East Greenwich newspaper?
Yeah,
or
I think
like
that might be.
Yeah,
but I haven't seen the nonprofit model work for a mid-sized metro like the Providence Journal. Like I haven't seen that, and maybe somebody could prove us wrong. But a sort of metro that does the daily stuff, the nonprofit model. Of course. The unicorn billionaire who swoops down and saves the day is always that's what people when they're tossing and turning at night, worried about the future, hope for. I mean, it's worked for the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos is not a dumb guy. I think he and I don't think he's I don't know why he decided to do that, but I suspect it wasn't to lose a ton of money. So I think he sort of saw an opportunity there. There's John Henry owning the Boston Globe. Somebody who's able to absorb more financial risk than a hedge fund that has investors to worry about. I think the Los Angeles Times also has a similar owner now. I forget the guy's name, but
yes, because it just came up because they took their paywall down for.
Yeah. They I think the guy bought it for like $500 million or something, and is running it while investing in the future. And there are only so many benevolent billionaires to go around.
Yeah.
I think. I think that model has worked, but maybe is not as common. So
yeah, but I agree with that as well. It seems that the market, as long as we're going to be in a market monetary system and not a resource kind of based economy here, we're not going to turn the world upside down. Then it's going to be profits that drive it. It's just about the funding structure.
Yeah.
All right, last few minutes here. We got Moldgate going on. I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't personally think we're going to have a new speaker that he's coming out in handcuffs or anything like that. But this is definitely going to be a tough challenge for the speaker to just optically get out of. You never know what'll play out. But in any case, right now, business as usual in Rhode Island. Do you think people in general out there in the outer spheres of political, not inside baseball, I guess, does the average person know? Because, if you look at the network, not the network news, the television news, the main station last night didn't even run the Matt Yellow story on the 11 o'clock news. So it's interesting to me. Do you think the average person, I guess, from your vantage point, realizes that there's this moment of, possible concern for the speaker and the power structure on Smith Hill?
Well, I mean, I think we saw the vote to become speaker was, there were some defections, and now those are the same people who are sort of the same people who are coming out and saying, "Oh, the scandal-plagued speaker." I think, Moldgate, I think, from what I can tell, from the reporting, I think that what we've been able to ascertain is that, and this is a little weasel word, is that it's not clear what they found in the dumpsters besides moldy furniture. So, there was nobody has seen the state troopers coming out with the files that are going to take down Nick Mattiello, right? It's not, nobody has, absent any evidence to the contrary, they really did rip up some carpets in there as they showed us, and there really was some furniture in the dumpster. I'm not a mold expert, so I don't know what the actual situation was there. I think you come at the king, you best not miss, and I think that a lot of the people who are dissatisfied with Speaker Mattiello's leadership have, had a big push to get him out, and didn't come close to succeeding in a lot of ways. At the ballot box, who knows? He did have a pretty close call a couple of years ago.
Not the same. Barbara Ann Fenton might be running.
Yeah, and that could be interesting. I mean, that's a prominent Cranston person, a prominent figure in Cranston. She could give him a run for his money. Although in 2020, with Donald Trump at the top of the ballot, it's probably going to be. I don't know how the presidential race affects things down the ticket. In 2016, frankly, I don't think anybody would have expected that, Donald Trump, like the actual Donald Trump, like not some figurative Donald Trump, but like the guy who was on TV, the guy, yeah, Donald Trump, he's our president now. I think that was surprising for a lot of people. Sure. So, so what really matters is what happens at the ballot box. But I think I haven't seen since Moldgate broke, since the Britt indictment, the money laundering. If he was going to get indicted in the money laundering indictment, he would have gotten indicted. So I think that sort of legal peril is probably, he wasn't charged in that case, sure. and he might get called to testify, and it'll be some bad headlines, but. If he has the votes, he has the votes, whether that's in the House or whether that's in his district in Cranston. Could he get taken out by at the ballot box? Yeah, very possibly he could. He was close. He had a close call.
86 votes or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if a mailer made a difference. I don't know if a direct. Right. I throw those in the trash just along with the the pizza pamphlets and my bills. Those go directly in the recycling. But he could get a run for his money. But who knows? I think that the dynamics of politics are hard to say right now, couple months out. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Last question, just sort of your take on Rhode Island. You know what I mean? Do you live here?
Yeah, I live in Providence.
Yeah.
I love Rhode Island. I'm from Massachusetts, from Chelmsford, Mass, just outside of Lowell, and it is, and I'm not just sucking up to the audience, but I really just like Rhode Islanders. Like they're kind of, they're kind of a little bit different, a little, I feel a real kinship. They're very friendly, but also private, and there's a lot of characters here. There's funny people. There's good people here, and I kind of feel like like I said, I'm going on 32. I've bounced around all around the Northeast, but this feels like a place that could be home for the rest of my run here. I think it's great. I've really, really liked it, and I'm definitely not in a rush to leave. I think I could stick around for a while because actually I'm looking for a potentially buy a house. So if any of your listeners have recommendations
in Providence,
maybe the East Bay. I'm Portuguese, so I'd love to live in Bristol. I'd love to live in East Providence. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and get some pastéis nata. Roll out of bed and get some porco lentejana, whatever. I think it's. So looking for the next place, whether that's Providence or East Bay. So any recommendations for the next place to live? But it'll be somewhere in Rhode Island. I think it's a great place to be. I've been really happy here.
Bristol Warren's interesting. I lived in Williamsboro. I lived in Bushwick in Brooklyn, and I never really took it much, but I'd always see the water taxi.
Yep.
Going from Williamsburg to the Lower East Side, and people going to work that way, and it's like maybe 15 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
I was like, that right there is, and I know people have looked at it, but that's all right, if you put the water taxi in and you start filling up Warren, which has already got a lot going on with Main Street, with Galactic Theater and a lot of other things happening. But
all right, I'm doing Warren. You've convinced me. Warren. All right, and I'm going to start a water taxi. Yeah. It'll be my side hustle. I'll have a big floppy hat, and it'll be great. I'll be what a great way to commute to work. I mean, just getting unless it's in January. Today might not be as pleasant, but just imagine like a nice, beautiful June day, and just like taking in the fresh air along the river. That would be great. I think it's $1 million idea.
There it is.
And we'll record the next podcast aboard the ship of the SS Bartholomew Town.
That's it. Beautiful, and that'll be the generator for the future economies of Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
Right there, water taxis.
I mean, the nat sound in that, though, just the sound of the waves lapping up against the boat will just be a great soundtrack for this podcast. I think it's let's do it.
Hey, thanks for spending part of your day here on the Bartholomew Town podcast. I'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new episode, and remember, there's over 160 episodes waiting for you at ripodcast.com or your favorite app. Until next time, we'll talk soon.
This is the Bartholomew Town podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.